to serve and protect. That is the motto of civilian police officers here in the United States. To serve and protect. That is the primary duty of an officer of the law. But now let me ask you, what does it mean to serve and to protect? Does it mean to wrongfully arrest someone for a crime they haven't committed? Does it mean putting a man in a chokehold and not letting go even after he says, "I can't breathe," 11 times? Does it mean shooting an unarmed teenage boy and leaving him in the middle of the street with no first aid for over 10 minutes? Not even in the slightest. And yet we know these stories all too well. These are the stories of people like Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and many more who've gone without media coverage. Police misconduct, with special attention paid to the use of excessive force, historically has been and continues to be an immense problem in our country. A problem that we could potentially end with the introduction of police oversight cameras. In 2010, the National Police Misconduct Statistics found that there were more than 4,000 reports of police misconduct. Out of those 4,000 reports, there were over 6,000 officers involved and almost 7,000 alleged victims. 4,000 reports, 7,000 victims, 6,000 officers all arrested and investigated for misconduct. And how many of them were found guilty? Only 30%. Less than 1/3 of officers arrested were convicted, compared to an almost 70% conviction rate of the general public. I know it's easy to get lost in the numbers, therefore I shall simplify them. The new magic number is 1. The story of one individual to bring the statistics back into perspective. In the summer of 2011, a family friend of mine was walking down Broadway in our very own Seattle neighborhood of Capitol Hill. His name is John. As John and a friend were walking down Broadway, he was then stopped and detained by the police, where upon illegally searching him, they found a bottle of Fireball whiskey in his backpack. John, being 23 at the time, had seemingly broken no laws, and yet the police officers arrested him anyways. Frustrated with the fact that he was being wrongly arrested, John asked a question that would change his life forever. Why? He was then brutally beaten by the 2 officers for supposedly resisting. His face slammed against cold concrete, knees digging into his ribs, fists coming at him from all directions, and with his hands cuffed behind his back, all he could do is scream, "Why? Why did he deserve this horrific torture? Why did the ones that vowed to protect and serve him become the same ones to assault and mutilate him? Why did he deserve to be beaten, bloody, and thrown into the back of a cop car like an animal? His clothes were torn to shreds, his face bruised, covered in dirt and blood, streaked with tears. He was in so much pain that he cried and begged for someone to help him, and yet the officers ignored his pleas to be taken to the hospital and proceeded to take him to be booked and processed. Upon entering the jail, they noticed the severity of his injuries and finally took him to the hospital to be treated. This incident went without news coverage, without lawsuit, without prosecution of the officers. John's incident went unnoticed. There are more stories like John's out there. People being mistreated, abused, and ignored. Every day, there are people being beaten, maimed, disfigured, paralyzed, and killed by police officers who have forgotten the fact that their victims are human beings. The U.S. Department of Justice has found that the Seattle Police Department has exhibited a pattern of unnecessary and excessive force. This pattern, this routine practice of unnecessary and excessive use of force stems from 2 main problems: a lack of accountability and a lack of transparency. There's almost no one holding the officers that engage in this routine use of excessive force accountable. There are hardly any consequences for their actions. And the policing agencies are able to just sweep these incidents under the rug because there is little to no transparency. Well, it is time for this to end. We are calling for the accountability of the police officers. We are calling for the transparency of their policing agencies. We are calling for the protection of our constitutional rights. We are calling for future justices. What we are calling for is Washington State Senate Bill 5732. This bill will mandate that all police officers in Washington State be equipped with some sort of oversight recorder, whether body-worn camera or dashboard-mounted camera that records continuously without officer interruption. Under this bill, all recordings that are taken will be public record, and recordings flagged for misconduct will be stored for a minimum of 3 years. Senate Bill 5732 not only makes continuous recording a requirement, but it also has legal penalties for the officers who do not follow the recording guidelines. In a report from the American Civil Liberties Union on the implementation of police-worn body cameras, they found that cities that implemented their use saw a significant reduction in not only incidents that required the use of force, but also in alleged reports of police misconduct. They worked out in Oakland. They worked in Atlanta. They worked in Detroit. They worked in Washington, D.C., and they will work in Seattle and every other city in the state of Washington. So before Senate Bill 5732 hits the floor, I want you to take out your black ballpoint pen and let our representatives know that we are demanding accountability, and that we are demanding transparency, and that we are demanding the implementation of oversight recorders statewide. It is time to write to our state senators, to write to our city councilmen, to write to our local mayor and let them know that we are sick and tired of letting cases like John slip underneath the rug. Let them know that as citizens of Seattle, as citizens of the United States of America, as human beings, that we will no longer stand for the misconduct of police officers and the unconstitutional abuse of citizens. Let them remember what it means to protect and serve.